Hi, good afternoon again, grade 12s. We're continuing with rural settlement issues. Here we've got a super diagram of the spiral of rural decline that we have actually mentioned before. And this is where this is what happens to the rural areas when people are leaving them to move into the cities, the rural-urban migration. So it starts off that in rural areas there are not a lot of employment opportunities. So the young people, often the men, leave the area and they go out. So then there are less businesses, so less local services. The job market starts shrinking, services start closing, and so on. And this whole decline just sort of causes more outward migration. In your textbook on page 174, that's Platinum Geography, there's a super diagram there, also of the spiral of rural decline you can have a look at. So what are the consequences of this? Let's just have a look at some of these quickly. Deserted farmhouses, just left. Dilapidated buildings, that's buildings that are falling apart, they're not being looked after. Shops that are closed, they're just empty, standing there, and that also decreases the value of an area. Farmers resorting to anything, even ecotourism. We're going to look at ecotourism now. So what happens is that it's the young people, and then first of all mostly males that leave the area, which leaves you with an aging population, and you've got a population imbalance because you've got more females left behind than what there are men. So the older people are left to look after the farms, and then what happens is that younger children stop going to school so that they can help their grannies and granddads or the older people who are looking after them with the farming. So in the area, there are less wage earners, so there's less buying power, and shops start closing. With this, then the other facilities sort of follow suit. So, for example, the post office will close, the banks may close or only be open for certain hours. Eventually, people have to go further to do their shopping, go into neighbouring small centres and so on, which further decreases the spending in an area. Property values start declining. Families are separated for long periods of time, with the younger folks going off into the urban centres. And even then, the money that they send home may not be enough. It may be erratic. Well, that a whole heap of reasons. It could be that the people that have gone off to the urban centres are not finding jobs as easily as what they thought. And then also the cost of living in urban areas is really high. And eventually what we end up with is a term we call ghost towns. And this is, if you have a look at these pictures here, this is just where the towns or the areas have been deserted. There are just no people living there anymore. A couple of other problems that also plague developing countries in the rural areas is lack of access to land. And when we say lack of access to land, it's good agricultural land that we're talking about. Environmental problems. In South Africa, we are a water scarce country, so water is a huge issue. Lack of infrastructure and services, unemployment in the rural areas. And then, of course, the age-old one that still plagues us is HIV/AIDS. So some of the strategies to address these problems, we had a look at this rural repopulation in the case study you did last week, and that was an example in Norway, I think it was. So let's just have a look at our own country. Some of the things that we could look at is government investment in home industries, crafts and so on. Tourists absolutely love these things. Ecotourism is a term here, and this is where people are, they want to go to areas, natural areas that are being conserved. Places like the Kruger National Park, they're looking at ecotourism. Footloose industries, high-tech footloose industries. A footloose industry is an industry that is not tied down to a particular area. So you could have these industries in outlying areas. Old age homes. The older people perhaps don't want to stay in the hustle and bustle of the cities anymore, and they'd rather stay out in the quieter rural areas. And weekend visitors. These weekend visitors can be attracted through sporting events, cultural events, any exciting, different things that are happening on weekends that would attract people to an area. So here we've got a summary of the whole sort of scenarios. Let's just work through this quickly. We've got the rural-urban migration, and the reason for it, the factors, are these push and pull factors. Remembering the push factors are what is negative in the rural areas, pushing people away. The pull factors is what is positive in the urban areas and pulling people there. So the consequences, we've had a look at a couple of those. Here are a couple more that have been mentioned. For example, crime. There are increased farm murders and attacks and theft and that sort of thing because people are unemployed. People don't have work. People are desperate. Unemployment, population imbalance, and so on. Below standard services. All of these are consequences of the rural-urban migration. So what can be done? We looked at some of those. You've got to make the rural area attractive. People have got to want to move back there. But all of these things that we're going to do, or that you know, the suggestions that you're coming up with for what can be done, needs to take the local community into consideration. What are their basic needs? Because that needs to be met as well. Whatever plan you come up needs to be acceptable to them as well. You've got to do this through a process of consultation. The solutions you come up have got to be self-sustainable. You know, there can be government intervention or private sector intervention to start with, but it has to be able to continue going. And I think the most important one is, although you'll need to have a long-term plan, it's important to be able to see short-term goals, short-term gains. I think that's it. Thank you, Grade 12s.